8 signs you're a good-looking older man even if you don't think so. Age gap relationships. Have you ever wondered if you're still turning heads, even as the years pass? Do you ever catch a glance in the mirror and ask yourself, do I still have that presence, that appeal? It's natural to question our looks and wonder how others perceive us, especially as we grow older. Society often tells us that youth defines attraction. But here's the truth: you might be far more attractive than you realize. Think about this. Some of the most respected, admired, and magnetic men in history weren't young. They were men who carried themselves with confidence, wisdom, and a presence that commanded attention without even trying. In this video, we're diving into 8 undeniable signs that show you're a good-looking older man, even if you don't think so. These aren't just surface-level traits. They are signals that you exude strength, maturity, and quiet confidence, qualities that many find irresistible. And here's the best part. Once you recognize these signs in yourself, you'll start seeing the way people react to you in a whole new light. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover might just change the way you see yourself forever. Before we begin, I'd truly appreciate it if you could like this video. It helps spread valuable lessons about confidence and aging with grace. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss out. If you're ready to discover the signs that set you apart, comment 1 below to let me know you're here. Now, let's get started. 1. Younger women seem comfortable around you. The Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu once said, "He who is content is rich." True confidence, he believed, is not about proving oneself, but about embracing the quiet assurance of being. In ancient Greece, Socrates was known for his self-possession. He was neither the strongest nor the most handsome, yet people, especially the youth, were drawn to him. Why? Because he spoke with conviction, listened with patience, and carried himself with a presence that demanded no validation. A man who is at peace with himself, unshaken by the world's noise, naturally attracts attention, especially from those seeking stability in an unstable world. There was a time when men understood the weight of their presence. They spoke less but meant more. Their strength was not in volume but in the quiet steadiness of their words. But that time, it seems, is slipping away. I saw this firsthand one evening at a quiet jazz lounge downtown. It was one of those rare places untouched by the chaos of modern life. Dimly lit, slow-paced, filled with the soft hum of conversation and the distant melody of a saxophone. I sat at the bar nursing a glass of whiskey, watching the world move. A group of young women sat nearby, their laughter light but measured, their eyes scanning the room, not for entertainment, but for something real, something steady. Among them was a young man, eager, animated, trying too hard to impress. He leaned in too much, spoke too loudly, mistook attention for attraction. The women smiled politely but exchanged glances when he looked away. And then there was the older gentleman across from me. He was in his late 50s, maybe early 60s, salt and pepper hair, well-dressed but effortless. He wasn't trying to be noticed, he simply was. He sat with ease, his posture relaxed, his eyes focused not on himself but on the music, on the moment, and I watched as, one by one, the women's attention shifted. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but naturally. They leaned slightly in his direction. Their voices softened when speaking to him. They asked him questions, not about his job, his money, or his past, but about his thoughts. His perspective. The young man didn't understand what had happened. He had done everything he thought would make him attractive, flashed his smile, cracked his jokes, leaned forward to show interest, and yet it was the man who said little, who moved with quiet assurance, that held their attention. When the women finally left, one of them placed a gentle hand on the older man's shoulder as she said goodbye. It was a small gesture, but telling. He turned to me then and chuckled, shaking his head. "They remind me of my daughter's friends," he said, as if unaware of what had just happened. But he knew. Of course he knew, and that was the difference. He didn't seek validation. He didn't play a role. He simply embodied the kind of presence that, in an age of noise and restlessness, people, especially younger women, gravitated toward. So many men today chase after attraction like a prize to be won, not realizing that it is presence, not pursuit, that draws people in. A man who carries himself with calm, who listens without seeking to prove, who moves through life with assurance rather than arrogance, Such a man does not need to chase. The world, in its quiet moments, comes to him. What do you think? Have you noticed this shift in the way people respond to confidence versus composure? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your experiences in the comments below. Let's talk. 2. You get compliments on your style or grooming. Confucius once said, "Respect yourself, and others will respect you." In ancient Rome, Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations, "What we do echoes in eternity." The way a man presents himself, his style, his grooming, is not just about vanity. It is a reflection of self-respect, discipline, and an understanding of his place in the world. In many cultures, warriors, scholars, and statesmen dressed with purpose, not for others, but as an outward representation of their inner order. A well-groomed man commands attention not because of extravagance, but because he moves through life with care, intention, and quiet dignity. I've always believed that a man's appearance is his first unspoken word. Long before he opens his mouth, the world has already decided how much attention he deserves. Some call it superficial, but I call it reality. There's an old tailor's shop in my neighborhood, one of the last of its kind. No neon signs, no flashy advertisements, just an unassuming wooden sign with the words, "Harrison & Sons, Bespoke Clothiers" carved into it. I've been going there for years, and every time I step inside, it feels like stepping into a different era, an era where men took pride in how they presented themselves. One evening, I was there for a fitting when a young man rushed in, flustered, fidgeting with his untucked shirt. He looked around nervously before finally speaking. "I need a suit," he said. "Something good. I have a job interview tomorrow." Mr. Harrison, the tailor, an old man even older than me, nodded, measuring him with his eyes before motioning him forward. "And what do you do?" he asked. I'm trying to be a financial analyst," the young man answered. "M.A. Harrison." Harrison smiled, already pulling fabric swatches from the shelves. "Then let's dress you like one." As he worked, I watched the young man in the mirror. His shoulders were slightly slumped, his gaze uncertain. He didn't believe in himself yet. But then something remarkable happened. When the jacket was placed on his shoulders, he straightened. When the collar was adjusted, he lifted his chin. By the time he looked at himself fully dressed, he saw a different man staring back. A man who belonged in the room he wanted to walk into. "Damn," he muttered, smoothing the lapels. Harrison chuckled. "See, son, it's not about the suit. It's about what it reminds you. You are worth presenting well." The young man left that evening not just with a suit, but with a different presence. And I knew with certainty that he would walk into that interview differently than he had walked into the shopmen today. Have forgotten this simple truth. The way you dress does not change who you are, but it changes how the world responds to you. And sometimes, that change is enough to make you rise to meet the expectations set upon you. I've seen too many men let themselves fade into the background, thinking age or simplicity excuses them from caring. But dignity is not about excess. It is about respect, first for yourself and then for the world around you. So tell me, have you ever experienced a moment where changing the way you dressed changed the way you felt? Let's talk. Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear them. 3. Women give you lingering looks. The ancient Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi once said, "Fish are born in water, man is born in Tao." If fish, born in water, seek the deep shadow of pond and pool, all their needs are satisfied. If man, born in Tao, sinks into the deep shadow of non-action, his life is secure. True presence requires no force, no excessive effort, it simply is. In ancient Rome, Julius Caesar was known for his ability to command attention without raising his voice. It was said that when he entered a room, people would pause, drawn to something unspoken yet undeniable. A lingering look is never random, it is a recognition, conscious or not, of something deeper than appearance. There was a time when a man knew the value of his presence. When he entered a space, he did not rush to be seen, he let the world notice him naturally. But today, men chase attention like beggars, mistaking noise for presence, mistaking effort for magnetism. I learned this lesson long ago, in a quiet cafe on the corner of a street I used to frequent. It was the kind of place where people came to think, not just to scroll through screens. I had my usual table by the window, my coffee steaming, my book open, but I was watching as old men do. A young man sat a few tables away, restless, jittery. He was trying too hard, leaning forward too much, laughing too loud, forcing himself into a conversation with a woman who responded with polite smiles but distant eyes. She was there, but she wasn't really there. And then there was another man. He was older, maybe my age or a little younger, dressed simply but with purpose. He sat alone, not scrolling, not fidgeting, just being. His posture was relaxed, his gaze steady, his movements unhurried. And I watched as, little by little, the woman's eyes drifted from the young man to him. Not directly, not obviously, but in small, repeated glances, curious, assessing. She would speak, then look back, sip her drink, then glance again. The young man never noticed, too consumed with trying, but I saw, and the older man, he saw too. He met her eyes, not with arrogance, not with eagerness, but with quiet acknowledgement. And in that moment she smiled, not the polite smile she had been giving before, but something softer, more genuine. That's the thing about a lingering look. It is never random. It is a sign that something about you, your presence, your energy, has caught attention. Not by force, not by demand, but by simply existing in a way that commands recognition. Young men chase attention. Older men understand that real attraction comes from being the kind of man a woman notices, even when he says nothing. So tell me, have you ever caught someone's lingering glance and in that moment understood what it meant? Let's talk. Share your thoughts below. I'd love to hear your stories. 4. You're often approached for advice or help. Socrates once said, "The only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing." It was not humility alone that made him great, but his understanding that wisdom is not about having all the answers. It is about seeing deeper, asking the right questions, and guiding others to find their own truths. In ancient Japan, samurais sought counsel from elder warriors, not just for battle tactics but for lessons in patience, discipline, and honor. A wise man is not one who shouts advice, but one who listens, understands, and speaks when necessary. The more a man has lived, the more he becomes a lighthouse in a storm, a place of quiet clarity for those lost in the waves. There's something about age that changes the way people look at you. When you're young, people compete with you. When you're old, they come to you, not for competition, but for answers. It happened just the other day. I was sitting at the park, the way I often do, watching life unfold in slow motion. Young parents chasing toddlers, old couples walking hand in hand, teenagers lost in their glowing screens. And then there was him, a young man, mid-30s maybe, pacing back and forth, phone in hand, frustration written all over his face. I could hear his sighs from where I sat. "Damn it," he muttered, stuffing the phone into his pocket. I watched as he hesitated before walking toward me. He looked around first, as if embarrassed, then sat on the bench next to mine. He didn't say anything at first, just stared ahead. "Sir," he finally said, "can I ask you something?" I nodded, waiting. "How do you know when you're making the right decision?" Now that was a question. Not just about whatever was troubling him, but about life itself. "What decision?" I asked. "A woman," he admitted, rubbing his face. "Been with her 5 years. Everyone says it's time to settle down, but something doesn't feel right. I don't know if it's fear, or if I'm about to make a huge mistake." I smiled, looking out at the trees. Funny thing about life, everyone tells you to follow your heart, but no one tells you how to listen to it. He exhaled sharply, as if those words hit something deep. "When I was your age," I continued, "I married because I thought it was what I was supposed to do. The woman was kind, the timing was right, but deep inside, I knew something was missing. And you know what? That small feeling I ignored, it grew, and years later, it became the crack that broke everything apart." The young man swallowed hard. "So you're saying I shouldn't marry her?" "I'm saying," I corrected, "that you already have your answer. You just want someone to tell you it's okay to listen to it." He looked down, nodding slowly. The weight in his shoulders seemed lighter. "Thank you," he said after a long silence. I patted my knee and stood. "Son, you don't need my thanks. Just don't be the man who looks back and wonders why he ignored himself." As I walked away, I felt his eyes follow me, not just in gratitude but in understanding. Wisdom isn't about having the right answers. It's about knowing the right questions to ask. So tell me, have you ever ignored your gut and regretted it? Let's talk in the comments. Your experience might help someone find their own answers. 5. You have a confident, relaxed presence. Lao Tzu once wrote, "He who conquers others is strong, he who conquers himself is mighty." True confidence is not about force but about presence, the ability to stand firm without needing to prove yourself. In ancient India, the Bhagavad Gita speaks of the sthita prajna, a person of steady wisdom, unaffected by praise or criticism. Such a man walks into a room, and without a word, people sense his power. He does not demand attention. Attention finds him. Confidence is not loud. It is quiet, assured, and unwavering. It is the difference between a fire that rages and a flame that endures. There was a time when men measured themselves by the weight of their words and the steadiness of their hands. Now I see too many measuring themselves by how many eyes are on them, mistaking attention for respect. I learned this lesson long ago in a place most wouldn't expect, a poker table in a small, dimly lit bar. I wasn't playing, just watching, sipping a drink as the game unfolded before me. There were 5 men at the table, but 2 stood out. The first was young, full of restless energy. He leaned forward too much, grinned too wide, laughed too loud. He talked between every hand, making a show of his confidence. The second man was older, maybe in his 50s, dressed simply, his movements slow and deliberate. He barely spoke. He barely reacted. He just played. And yet, the entire table was aware of him. I watched as the younger man won a hand and leaned back with a cocky grin, flashing his chips like a warrior flashing his sword. But the older man just waited, and when the right moment came, he placed his bet with the ease of a man who had nothing to prove. It was the young one who blinked first. By the end of the night, the older man had most of the chips in front of him. He hadn't once tried to dominate the room. He had done nothing special, except exist, with complete assurance. And that, I realized, was the difference between them. Confidence is not in loud gestures. It is in the stillness of a man who knows who he is. I left that bar with a lesson that night. Over the years, I've watched men chase confidence in the wrong places, through wealth, through bravado, through attention. But the ones who truly understand it, they are the men who move slowly in a fast world, who speak when it matters, who do not need applause to know their worth. Women notice this. People notice this, because in a world filled with men trying to prove something, the rarest thing to find is a man who has nothing to prove. Tell me, have you ever encountered someone whose presence alone changed the entire room? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop them in the comments. Let's talk. 6. You get subtle compliments on your physical fitness. Hippocrates, the father of medicine, once said, "Walking is man's best medicine." The ancients knew that true strength was not just about muscle, but about vitality, the way a man moved, carried himself, and sustained his energy through the years. In the samurai tradition of Japan, warriors train not just in combat but in balance, endurance, and posture. A man who takes care of his body commands respect not because of bulk, but because of discipline. A strong back, a steady gait, and an effortless presence say more about a man than any display of strength ever could. I remember a time when strength was measured differently. It wasn't about how much a man could lift or how big his arms were. It was about endurance, the ability to carry life's burdens without breaking. A few months ago, I found myself at the grocery store, a simple errand, yet a place where life reveals itself in small ways. I was walking down the aisle when I noticed a young man struggling with a heavy bag of rice. His muscles were obvious, thick arms, broad shoulders, but he strained as he lifted, shifting his weight awkwardly. Across from him was another man, older, silver-haired, maybe in his late 60s. He was lean, not large, but when he moved, he did so with ease. He walked straight, shoulders back, body balanced, and when he picked up his own heavy bag, there was no struggle. Just a simple, efficient motion, like he had done it 100 times before. I watched as a young woman standing nearby took notice, not of the young man who huffed and flexed, but of the older one, the one who made strength look effortless. That moment stayed with me. Society has sold young men the idea that fitness is about looking impressive, but real strength is found in how a man carries himself. It's in the way he rises from a chair without groaning, in the way he walks with purpose, in the way his body does what it was meant to do, move with grace, power, and control. I've lived long enough to know that the body is a reflection of how a man treats himself. The ones who respect it age well, moving with the same quiet confidence at 60 as they did at 30. The ones who don't? You see it in their backs, in their slouched shoulders, in the way simple tasks become struggles before their time. People notice this, even if they don't say it outright. You'll hear it in subtle ways. You look strong for your age, or I hope I move like you when I'm older. These aren't just compliments. They're acknowledgments of something rare. A man who is taking care of himself, who hasn't let time steal his vitality. So tell me, have you ever noticed how real strength is recognized even in the smallest gestures? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let's talk in the comments. 7. Women laugh at your jokes. Aristotle once said, "The secret to humor is surprise." The greatest minds of history understood that laughter is more than amusement, it is connection, a bridge between people. In ancient Japan, even the most disciplined samurai used humor to maintain balance. The famed warrior poet Matsuo Basho was known for his sharp wit, using humor to break tension and reveal deeper truths. A man who can make others laugh, even with something simple, is a man who understands timing, confidence, and presence. Laughter is not just about jokes, it is about making people feel at ease in your company. I've lived long enough to know that the men who take themselves too seriously often lead the loneliest lives. There's something about humor, real humor, that draws people in. It's not the loud, forced kind, but the kind that makes people feel comfortable, at ease. The kind that turns a simple moment into something memorable. I remember an evening at a small Italian restaurant, one of those dimly lit places where conversations float like music in the background. I had taken my usual spot near the bar, enjoying a quiet meal, when I noticed a young man sitting across from a woman. He was stiff, too rehearsed. Every sentence sounded like something he had read in a book about impressing women. He talked about his career, his gym routine, the deep thoughts he had about life. And she nodded politely, but her eyes told another story. Then, something changed. An older man, gray-haired, wearing a well-worn blazer, walked by their table and without hesitation leaned down and said, "If your conversation is half as dry as your pasta, son, you're in trouble." The young man looked up, startled. But the woman? She burst into laughter. Not just a polite chuckle, but a genuine, surprised laugh that softened her entire expression. The older man winked and patted the young man's shoulder. "Don't overthink it, kid. She's here because she likes you, not because she wants a TED Talk." And with that, he walked back to his own table. Something shifted after that. The young man laughed at himself. The tension melted. The conversation turned lighter. And suddenly she was leaning in, smiling in a way she hadn't before. I watched it happen, knowing exactly why. A man who can make people laugh, even with something simple, is a man who understands presence. He isn't trying to prove anything. He isn't seeking approval. He is simply being. And that comfort is contagious. Humor isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's about knowing how to take the weight off a moment, how to make someone feel at ease. A man who can do that, he's someone people want to be around, not because of what he has, but because of how he makes them feel. So tell me, have you ever seen how humor changes the energy in a room? Have you ever laughed with someone and, in that moment, felt something shift? Let's talk in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories. 8. You notice subtle flirting gestures directed at you. The Roman philosopher Seneca once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." Attraction, like wisdom, is often unspoken, revealed in the smallest of gestures, a glance held a moment too long, a hand that lingers in passing, a quiet mirroring of movement. In ancient Persia, court poets believed that love was first expressed through the eyes, for the eyes betray what the lips cannot yet say. Even in the silence of a crowded room, the language of attraction is always present for those who know how to read it. A man who understands this does not chase, he recognizes. I have always believed that the most interesting conversations are the ones never spoken aloud. Attraction, the real kind, is not built on words, it's built on awareness, on the way someone's body responds before their mind catches up. I saw this not too long ago in a quiet bar downtown. It was the kind of place where people lingered over their drinks, where the music was soft enough to let a conversation breathe. I sat near the back, sipping my whiskey, watching the world unfold around me. At a table nearby, a man and a woman sat talking. He was older, well-dressed, calm, the kind of man who had lived long enough to stop rushing. She was younger, confident but composed, the type who measured her words carefully. At first it was all polite conversation, but then I saw it, the way she leaned in just slightly, closing the space between them, the way her fingers traced the rim of her glass absent-mindedly as he spoke, and then, the moment her body language truly betrayed her, she mirrored him. When he shifted in his seat, so did she. Awaken. When he rested his hand on the table, a moment later, so did she. Most men would have missed it. They would have kept talking, focused on their own words, blind to what was happening in the quiet spaces between them. But this man? He saw. He met her gaze, and held it. Not too long, just long enough to let her know that he understood, that he wasn't oblivious but he wasn't desperate either, that he recognized the moment but he wasn't in a hurry to claim it, and that was all it took. She smiled, tilting her head slightly, her fingers brushing his wrist as she reached for her drink, a touch so light, so seemingly accidental, yet deliberate in every way. This is the language of attraction. It does not shout, it does not beg, it whispers, it waits. It allows itself to be recognized by those who know how to listen. Most men today are too distracted to notice. They are looking for the obvious signs, the grand gestures, the confirmations. But real attraction is in the subtleties, in the lingering eye contact, in the mirroring of movement, in the way a woman's body speaks before she ever dares to say the words aloud. The difference between a man who struggles and a man who never chases is simple. One is searching, the other is simply aware. Tell me, have you ever noticed the small gestures that say more than words ever could? Let's talk in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And there you have it. 8 subtle yet undeniable signs that you might be more attractive than you think. Attraction isn't just about youth or looks, it's about presence, confidence, and the quiet strength of a man who knows himself. The world often tries to tell us that aging is about fading away, about losing relevance, but that couldn't be further from the truth. If anything, time refines you. It strips away the insecurities, leaving behind the version of yourself that is most real, most compelling. So the next time you catch a lingering look, receive a compliment on your style, or notice someone drawn to your presence, don't brush it off. Take a moment to recognize that it's not just about how you appear, but about how you carry yourself. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced one of these signs and only realized it later? Which of these resonated with you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means the world, and it helps keep conversations like this going. Until next time, stay confident, stay aware, and remember, you're more attractive than you think.